From the creators of Off the Record, one of the most exclusive, invite-only events for revenue leaders, GetAccept is now bringing these conversations and insights on the record. This is the podcast where revenue leaders share their biggest challenges and how they overcame them. And here's your host, Morgan Ingram.
Are you ready to revolutionize your sales leadership experience? In this episode with Christina Brady, she's not only a good friend, but also advised her company, and she has had a crazy amount of experience when it comes to sales leadership. And in this conversation, I learned so much, and I know you will too. To give you a quick peek into the scenario of what we talked about, number one is we said, how do you go from SMB sales to an enterprise sales? What are the motions that you need to take to go be successful, to get in front of the right people? Ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're able to do this, you're going to have the sales success. The other thing that we talked about is how to be patient with your team as you make these changes. What are the different conversations you need to have? How do you have conversations with other departments? And how do you make sure you keep your sales team aligned and where they need to go? And ultimately, the last thing that I think that was the most important is when you're having these conversations with your sales team, that you're documenting every single step of the way so this can be repeatable for new sales reps that come in. So in this episode, we're going to dive into all the different frameworks. She's going to give all the tea across the board. And so let's now dive in.
Okay, Christina. So this, I think, is our first time doing a podcast together. I just thought about this. I think it's our first time doing this. Yeah. I went through and did a Google search. I went through YouTube and I was like, this is our first podcast conversation. Even though our conversations in person would be a podcast episode, we just never recorded it.
That is you're an equity holding advisor with my company, and we've never been in a podcast
together. We've never done it. I looked through it and I was like, today's the day. So with that being said, we always start with a fun question here in the beginning. And this question, I feel bad because when I found out that you were this, I was like, dang, I don't know how I didn't know this. So I guess it's on me. So you were a comedian.
Oh my God, yeah.
And then I didn't know. And then everyone was like, how do you not know? And then I felt like an idiot. And I was like, guess I'm going to be removed from the advisory board because I didn't know this detail.
Yeah, I fired you.
But what made you want to become a comedian, and who was your inspiration?
Oh my gosh, so many of the greats were my inspiration. Honestly, it was like the collective casts of things like Mad TV or SNL or, it was like I always wanted to be an actor. Even as a young kid, I grew up in a very, very musical, theater-driven, artistic family, and it's something that I always did. And then I always veered toward comedy. I just found it I realized that laughter always felt really, really good, and I just loved bringing some jovialness to conversations. And when I was in high school, my mom signed me up for the Second City Conservatory program. And so it's where very early on, you can start to learn the muscle. And I just glommed onto this idea of improv and sketch comedy.
Yeah.
While I was in college, I went to Columbia College here in Chicago, and a lot of the professors there also work actively in theater, kind of around. And by happenstance, I happened to be in a workshop through school. And a director for one of the shows at Improv Olympic was leading this. And at the very end of it, and so I'm in the workshop and I'm having fun and I'm just, whatever, doing my thing. At the very end of it, he pulls me aside and he was like, you should come to see my show. Are you familiar with the show, The Cupid Players, which was a show at Improv Olympic? I said, yeah. And so I came to the show. He had a seat reserved for me. And after the show, he's like, what'd you think? I'm like, I loved it. He's like, come back next week, wear all black. I was like, okay. So I did. Right before the show, he comes out and he was like, you're in the show tonight. And I was like, what? Huh? And he brought me backstage and the cast is there. And he was like, this is Christina. She's in the show tonight. She doesn't know what she's doing. Help her out. And they were like, all right, here's what we're going to do. And this was a musical sketch comedy show. This was a 80% scripted musical funny show. And they were like, you're in it now. And I'm like, I don't know the song. And they're like, right, you're in it. That was the first time that I
I
entered
don't know what
into.
I'm doing, but you're in it. Best of luck. Okay.
Yeah. That's the life. And that wound up leading my 12-year journey into comedy at IO. I did some Second City stuff. I did some stand up. I did some early commercial work. You will never find it. Don't even try. But yeah, and now I just do corporate improv workshops for fun.
How has that helped you in what you do today?
The muscle of it's how you view getting caught off guard. So what improv retrains the brain on is when you don't have the muscle for how to pivot and not get caught off guard, when you get asked a question that you don't know the answer to, or when you get confronted, or when somebody says something that's surprising to you, you usually get the panic response, which sometimes leads to like a physical response. Like you ever see people that get really blotchy in the chest and, it's like,
they're like,
yeah, there's that physical stress response. Cortisol is being released. You're smashing your serotonin down, right? And it's because your brain is going into a panic response. Well, in a panic response, you can't be creative. You can't enjoy yourself. You can't be strategic. And so what improv trains you how to do is take those moments of, I don't know what's going to happen here, or I'm caught off guard, or, oh my God, I wasn't expecting that.
right.
And you view it as an opportunity. It also helps you understand how to interact within an ensemble, because the key to improv comedy is you're not always the laugh. You either are the laugh or you're supporting the laugh. And you have to figure out in an instant, is the joke on me or am I supporting the joke? And same thing with ensemble working, right? When you're in a call with you and your CSM and your SE and the customer, it's like, where do I fit in with this? And how do I observe what's happening in the room to be as impactful as I can? It just retrains the brain.
I've never done improv at all. People tell me that I should try it out.
Oh my God, do it.
Okay. Even though I might get cooked, but it's it still would be an experience. So I'm always 100% down. So no, I think I've always was curious, and I like how you explained a couple things of it prepares your muscle for things that you're, not prepared for, how to work with a team also essentially as well. And a lot of that has to do with like sales as a part of it. So, obviously as of right now, you are the CEO founder of Luster, and you can explain that a little bit more. But today we're here to talk about the challenge you've had as a sales leader. So what is like one big challenge that you faced as a sales leader where you were like, I have no idea what's going on, and then we'll unpack it from there.
Morgan, I had to take a sip of my Bang for this one. Had to get juiced up for this. Obviously, as a sales leader, so I've been in a leadership role within SaaS for about 12, 13 years. I've been a salesperson for the last 17, and certainly plenty of challenges. The biggest one that I had that for the first time made me feel like I don't know how I am going to get this done. An organization that I was at previously had found a lot of success in SMB, lower mid-market types of SaaS organizations.
Okay.
However, in the course of these couple of years, that industry was getting absolutely clobbered with layoffs, lack of VC funding. Like it was going through the washing machine in the worst. It was like white clothing with a red shirt. Everything is effed up, right? And so this organization decided right after I joined that they were going to pivot from where they had found likely, if not product market fit, really close to product market fit.
Yeah.
And it was the classic, we're going to go up market to enterprise non-tech, like in the drop of a hat. And you go from an SMB type of sale to an enterprise sale, non-tech, different type of customer with the same product that is built for your old ICP. And on the flip side of that, there was also this, oh, and by the way, revenue has been dropping year over year. And so we have to not only go and increase revenue immediately, but we have to pivot the entire go-to-market motion to customers that don't know us, whose buying cycles we are not aware of, where the product is not ready to serve them yet. And the sole decision for that was, well, there's more money in enterprise. And so as a leader, I was like, okay, I have to counteract the things that are being said in this room because there's a lot here that is an assumption that is not rooted in reality. And I have to now pivot an entire team full of people into producing in a segment that takes 18 months to ramp up. And we can obviously delve more into it. What'd you say?
This all sounds super glorious right now.
Yeah, it was fun. The reason that my hair is now gray, like if you ask me today, like, what's your actual hair color? I'm like, I don't know. White is because of that.
Okay. So clearly you are facing an uphill battle.
Yeah.
And how many, okay, so you're leading this team, correct? How
Yep.
many people are on this team?
So at the time, so right after I started at this organization as well, there was a reduction in force that I was not aware of that pulled out my middle management. So
What,
I
how,
was
like
going in.
30%, 40%? Like, how big is this?
Well, there had been a series of reduction in forces prior to that. And
Oh,
so
it was like a, okay, yeah, it was like
it
a,
was like cut, 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 cut. I want to say the
big cut.
entire reduction was like 50%, 60%.
Okay.
Yay. I know. I know. And so middle management was pulled out, which then meant I, as an executive sales leader, was running the BDR team front lines, the AE front lines, and all of operations and enablement underneath that. So I wound up having 16, 17 direct reports across 4 lines of business.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So let's go into, you're selling into a completely different segmentation with a product that they typically probably have not invested into, or you don't even have like a good footing there.
Right.
How did you, I guess the challenge probably was people on that team probably were like, I'm out of here. Did a lot of people leave once they realized that? And how did you like get people to like stay on the course?
I mean, the first thing was if we have ever won with a lookalike customer in any way, shape, or form, can we identify where we won, why we won? Are there expansion opportunities within existing deals? Because what I found is that there's a lot of organizations who have never sold an enterprise who think that
Yeah.
if you close any deal with an enterprise organization,
Right.
that's an enterprise deal. And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, no, no. That is a small deal in an enterprise account. That is very different than creating an enterprise sales motion.
Yep.
Um,
Can we
and for
clarify,
the
like, is it
Yeah,
enterprise sales motion? Is that due to a dollar amount, or is this the amount of people involved? Like,
it's both. It's
okay.
both. So it's the size of prize of the initial deal that you are closing. Now, there are some enterprise strategies that are like a land and expand, right? Where it's like just get in the door and then expand. This motion was not there at this organization. So it's more so what is the time that it takes to close an enterprise level deal? Typically, you're looking, if it's true enterprise, whether it's a small deal or a large, it's 12 to 18 months.
Okay.
It's 9 to 13 decision makers. It's a long procurement process that is usually either outsourced or has its entire department. And then on top of that, there's incumbent technology that is well rooted within these organizations that you may not even be aware of that is competitive. And we came across all of those things when we were there,
Yeah.
right? It was like those headwinds were immense.
Wow. Okay. So what made you continue on? Why didn't you quit?
I like a challenge. And
Like to a sickening degree, or just
I mean, like, like you jumped right in the pool, and I was like, I jumped in an oven. It's a little, it's like, yeah,
Or I jumped into a pool of sharks and I wanted to see if I could get out of it.
that's right. I jumped into a pool of sharks wearing a meat suit. So it's like, there's one, the challenges that I had doing that actually taught me a ton. Like when I think about a lot of the mistakes that I want to avoid now being a founder myself, you either learn by seeing something done really, really well or by seeing something done really, really not well.
Yeah.
And for me, there were initially things that I hadn't necessarily done yet in my career that I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this a shot and I'm going to learn a ton. I had a really wonderful team. Like my peers and my direct reports were absolutely incredible. And we all kind of made the commitment together as a group from a cultural standpoint of things have been really, really hard until we get to this point, but all of us are going to be in this together and we're going to give it a shot. And we all committed to that. And there's something powerful about a group of people agreeing that it's like all of us have our hands on each other's back. We're going to give this a shot. Let's go. And so that's what made me just dive into it and see what I could do.
So that's professionally, personally as well. We've had a couple of these episodes where people are going through these crazy scenarios, and I just like to get our understanding, like personally, like how did you make sure that you didn't go insane? Like what was the challenge personally? Because obviously everything professionally is gonna obviously roll over into what you're doing personally. So how did you like navigate those challenges like mentally as well?
I'm gonna be candid. That was unbelievably difficult. I would love to say that I navigated that situation and I embodied self-care, and I utilized exercises to keep myself calm. There was a lot of emotion tied up in that because I cared so deeply and I didn't want to let people down. The amount of stress that I took on during that time that then just turned into hardcore fear made it very, very difficult for even me to perform my best. And then all I could think about was, how do I not let the feelings that I'm having and the fear and the stress and staying up at night wondering if I'm going to be able to do this or if my job is safe or if my job is secure. I mean, it borderline ate me alive. And all I could think about was, I don't want people on my team to feel this way. I don't know if I can protect them, but what I can protect them from is feeling like this and feeling this element of stress and robbing their personal life of happy memories because their professional life is eating into it. So it really just turned into, how do I filter this feeling? And then how do I find ways to cope with it? But difficult things are difficult things.
Yeah. And we're gonna move into like the next piece here, because what you're talking about is like the difficult things are inevitable, like they will happen. It is what you learn from that process and what you take from it moving forward to be better. Like you said, you change that. And we'll talk about that later. But what I want to talk about now is like, okay, now that we realize what the challenge is, you are fighting a very uphill battle and there's a lot of insane things going on, but you obviously want to make sure that this team, right, can be successful and you're going to lead appropriately. Once you realize the situation, this is a pretty bad situation, what were the steps that you took to move in a positive direction?
Yeah. Well, because to your point, you have to start somewhere. And one of the first things,
being stagnant is the worst thing you can do, in my opinion.
Yeah. And it's like, it's so easy in those moments to feel so unbelievably paralyzed.
Yeah.
Like the paralysis of, okay, there's 15 different things that I need to do. And I'm not just an executive leader at this point. At this point, I'm an executive leader, I'm a middle line leader, and I'm a frontline leader. And I have individual contributors that are looking to me to try to figure out, hey, how do I have success on this individual call? And then I have the entire organization looking at me as, how do we be successful in hitting our year over year metrics and KPIs? And then you've got me sitting there a month and a half into the business going, I don't even know if I fully understand the product yet. And I have to transition all these things. So the first thing that I did, as I said, okay, mission critical is we have to find a way to revenue and product market fit. And we have to determine, is this product viable in these larger customers? And so the first thing that I did was listen a lot to uncover, what is our current sales process? Is anybody using any kind of a methodology? Is it discernible? Is it unified? Are we being the best users of our own product? Because our own product at the time should have been something that helped a lot with this. And so I said, okay, well, if we're not using our own product, that could be hindering us from selling it. And then one of the other main things I picked up on was the team was really reliant on the SCs on the team to help do a lot of the selling and the technical work of the product. And they weren't able to really have the right talk track that they needed to go up market into enterprise. So first place I focus is, where do I need to enable this team right now, so that we can go and we can uncover revenue anywhere? Because I didn't even feel confident that they were in a position to do that. So I partnered with my enablement person, and we figured out sort of a 90-day plan as to how do we uncover and train on some of the fundamentals for how we find revenue and decrease churn with our customers. And so it was like hyper focusing on one thing. We needed to focus on 20 things, but you can't focus on 20 things all at once.
You can't. Okay. So you focus on the main core things first. And then when you do things like that, is it like, okay, we focus on things you mentioned. Is it, hey, we're going to double down on one thing as a team once you identify that, and then now everyone falls into that? Or is there still tests going along the way?
It's a little bit of both. Because what I found was, what had happened at this organization was there was a legacy salesperson who essentially was the big player, right? They were the person who had been there from the very beginning, very, very skilled salesperson, maniacally understanding of the product. Like, they were essentially the go-to star individual. This star individual, right before I got to the organization, left the organization. And so you
with
have
all
this
the insight with him.
Yeah, correct. Right. And so you have all of this knowledge, and the benefit of having a person like that, there's a benefit and a downside of having a person like that. The benefit of having a person like that is when you say, hey, we're switching the strategy. that person has enough contextual information to be able to pivot and evolve with very, very little instruction, right? So you go to that person, we're changing our sales motion, and they go, okay, they calculate it, they put it together. The downside is they're the person that can do that. And oftentimes the knowledge that lives in the head of your very best reps or BDRs or CSMs doesn't make it to the rest of the sales floor. And so you celebrate that person, but creates a further rift. And so we had that situation too. So it was what was in that person's mind that everybody at this organization needs to know. And can we focus there first?
Yeah. Wow. How would you, I guess if you have someone ever like that, you want to make sure you document all that stuff moving forward. You probably learned that. I mean, that lesson of like, we should have had some documentation of what this person was doing.
Honestly, documentation is huge. Specifically, when you're talking about startups, there's a place where so many of them go wrong. And this was a big learning for me as a founder. I've seen multiple times where you go from founder-led sale to founding AE-led sale to a scalable sales motion. And those three processes are very, very different. And you will often see that a founder or a founding AE will grab onto their process that worked for them and say, everyone should just say what we're saying. And if everyone says what we're saying, they will sell. And that was the case of this organization as well, right? You had the founder who was saying, this is the sales motion. And then you had me and others coming in and saying, but the AEs can't approach it the way that you did. They can't say what you said. A founder sale and a scalable AE sale are two very, very different things. And there was no documentation or process on what does that evolution look like. There was no deliberate steps taken to make that happen. Huge learning for me now founding my own company. I'm already thinking about like, okay, what I'm doing isn't going to work for everybody.
No.
And so what will work for everybody? And how do we transition that? And to your point, how do we document it? And how do we enablement so that when we hire more AEs, I'm not saying, hey, say what I say. I'm saying this is the end in mind of what we want at every stage. Here's how we want the customer to feel. Here's how we want them to be enabled. Here's the information we need them to have. And then develop a process for a salesperson, because founder salespeople, not the same thing.
No, completely different. And we talked about documentation, and you talked about how your team, you were focused on these core functions to get started in the right direction. How often were you looking at documenting people's processes as they continuously got better in this organization, which is like a once a quarter thing?
Ideally it would be a once a quarter thing, but I mean, this was like a weekly.
This is weekly.
It was a weekly thing.
Okay.
And it had to be because everybody was doing something different.
Yeah.
But nobody knew what actually worked. And so when
you had to come together to figure it out. Yeah.
We had to, because it was like, yes, everybody here has closed a deal. They've all done it a very, very different way. It was all during different points of the year. It was all different sized customers. It was using 16 different sales decks and use case decks. Like, so there was no discernible, like, this is what works. And so that was challenging.
How did you, so like go through the process here. How are you piecing this together? Is it like, okay, this person has a really good way of explaining the customer story, so we took that? Or like someone had a really good way of walking through the demo, so you took that? How are you analyzing each part of, let's say, the sales process and the call to come up with like, this is what universally we should do?
It was a really long process because we were not tech or tool enabled to have any automation in this whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so you've got me and our operator, who was also the enablement person. She was unbelievably phenomenal. But you basically got the two of us sitting there and doing call reviews and email reviews and trying to go back in time and look at deals that have been closed and figure out what got that deal closed. And in most cases, we were looking at deals that had been closed that had been passed off from rep to rep to rep that finally came through. So it was this very, very manual uncovering of one. Yeah. Do we even have a baseline sales process? Like, what is stage one of our sales
process? What are we doing?
Yeah. Do we all agree on what stage one is? And then what is stage two? Do we all agree on? And I remember I asked every rep on the team, like, walk through the stages of this company sales process, not yours, but like, what would this company want you to do? Yeah. Every single answer was different. And so the first thing I was like, okay, so we don't have a sales process, right?
Yeah, no. And so as we move on to 3 is like how this has impacted your career. what was the result of all this? Okay, so you are in the process of collecting all these data points. You are in the process of figuring out what's our sales process. I'm assuming that it ended well, but like what happened here?
I don't know that I could even say that it ended well. Here's what I can say is we got to the point where we found what we believed and what we saw really early signs of being a very, very positive step in the right direction. Now, keep in mind, we had been going from a high velocity sale to an enterprise sale.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so in my mind, I was like, okay, it's Q1 right now. We're not going to see an increase in pipeline or meaningful movement in deals until maybe Q3, Q4, because that's what it's like to sell into enterprise when we're established there. And
Yeah.
we are not. And so for us, it was, this is the right thing to do. It might get worse before it gets better. Now, I had the appetite for that. A couple of the others had the appetite for that. Some other folks in higher up leadership did not have the appetite for it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Sure.
And that's where it got difficult because it was, there's no other way that this can go. If you want to pivot the business like this, it's going to get worse before it gets better, but then it will get better. And we're going to have the right people in seat. And we're going to have a sales process that can scale wherever you need it to scale. And we can evolve as we go, but we will know if this is working, if we can have more pipeline, and if we can start to see some early velocity in enterprise deals by Q3 or by Q4. And what I can say is, by Q3 or by Q4, we actually did have that and we started to see it happen. And so there were a lot of painful months in between that. A lot of infighting, a lot of negativity, a lot of we got to pivot. And it was, we can't pivot, right? That's the biggest thing is like when it's not working right away and you don't know what you're measuring and how long it's going to take. There is hey, it's been a couple of months. It's not working, pivot. And then it wasn't supposed to work in a couple of months. And so I would say the challenge was that.
Like, is it like a 6-month thing?
Well, you think about, okay, if a typical enterprise sales cycle, and this is a big average, is going to take anywhere, call it 10, 12 months.
Yeah.
Right, sales cycle.
Yeah.
If the first time that I start calling on those enterprise customers or outreaching or sequencing, whatever it may be, isn't until March of that calendar year, then the first time that I would potentially see any fruits of that labor in the form of pipeline or anything else would be 6-7 months down the line. And that would be a good thing, right? And so we were saying, look, this is how long it takes. If we can have these results by then, that's a good thing. The patience in the business to get there was actually the biggest uphill battle. It wasn't the doing it. To doing it, we could do. It was the internal, it's not happening fast enough. I needed to be like faster. That was the part that was difficult.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think people always want to retreat away from a strategy. If it doesn't work in like 2 weeks, it's like, this isn't going to work. It's like, we got to give it some time, guys. Like, come on. Like, let's kind of ease it to this. So now I want to go into like the third part, which is like how you mentioned at the beginning of this that the challenges impacted your career, and now you're also seeing things different as a founder. So this is more of a broad question, but how did this scenario, this challenge, impact your career and make you see things differently as just a sales practitioner and leader?
First thing, I'm going to answer this qualitatively and quantitatively. Qualitatively, I had never quite experienced how much stress from the top really impacts teams, because I'd always been a little bit more removed from it. I'd worked at larger organizations, and while I had been a member of the executive team, you're a bit more removed from that. You've got more infrastructure, more people, right? There's a big difference between a 100-person org and a 700-person org. Mm-hmm. So in an early stage, any volatility impacts your people more than I could have ever imagined. And so for me, it's, wow, a lot of that came from these really specific places. And how do I avoid that to not make people feel the way that I absolutely felt?
Right.
So that's one piece of it. The ability to understand how long things take and what chances are worth it and what's not. And communication, my God, so many of the problems that we had could have been solved with healthier, open-minded, non-egotistical communication. Yeah. And so for me, it was like, as a founder, you have to be willing to know where you're right, know where you're wrong, and be okay with both of those things. And they can shift. And so that was a big piece of it. The other big quantitative learning that I had was this idea of very, very early on as a founder, anybody that wants to give you money, it feels real sexy to take that money, right? You get a company that Like, you get a company that inbounds in and they're like, we want to buy this product. It is amazing. Maniacal focus on product market fit and who you are serving is so important, because the other
Mhm.
thing I saw that happened at this organization and others was taking money because you needed it. And I get it now, right? When I have people that are like, we want to buy this, and I'm like, you're not a fit for it. Like, that is difficult.
Yeah.
But when that happens, you now have your revenue, your churn, all of your metrics that you need to be successful and raise rooted in customers that are actually not a great fit for your product. And they're
Right.
going to influence your product roadmap, and you're going to make decisions for the product that don't make sense for the rest of your customers when you have product market fit and the entire thing cannibalizes. So it's that patience and willing to do the hard thing very, very early on, because you're looking out for the business a year from now. That was a
Yeah.
huge lesson.
I love that. These are fantastic lessons. Christina, thanks so much for joining us here on the episode. And as we wrap up, are there any shout outs and mentions that you want to make?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Um, One, I would have shout out you, because even in my current organization, you've been so unbelievably meaningful in strategy for me as an early on founder, and how to get things going and how to speak to people properly. I want to give a shout out to Laura Wheeler, who has been an incredible operations counterpart and dear friend of mine, who taught me so many wonderful lessons. My co-founding team at Leicester, Wes Craig and Jody Mesa, and then my other wonderful advisors who have really shown me what it looks like to be a great founder. That'd be Jen Iguarta and Kyle Himmelwright. Thank all of you for taking the messes that I learned early in my life and helping me to be as wonderful as I can be in this role right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the shout out. And then I'll shout out to the team as well and everyone else. And again, hopefully y'all listening in, you enjoyed the episode, you took some notes, and now you can go execute and make something happen for yourselves. So appreciate y'all listening in, and see you next time.
As I said, Christina is awesome, and you all got some incredible insights and sales techniques on what to do from a leadership standpoint, which further dives into what you should do right after this conversation. So, number one thing that you need to go do is be patient with your team. If you're shifting into an enterprise motion, these deals are going to take you 6 to 12 months to close. So, this is time for you to pay attention, calm down, keep it easy, and then go execute. Number two is, as a founder or a sales leader, and you're in this motion where things are changing, be patient with your reps, but also more importantly, make sure that as you're selling, that you're understanding what are the pain points and what's happening, so that you could repeat this process over and over again. And the third thing is, as you're moving into this enterprise sales motion, as we heard from Christina, make sure that every single time and every single week, you're understanding that this is going to be an obstacle. This will be a struggle. This is not going to be easy. And so as you go through it, make sure that you're reviewing calls on a weekly basis and elevating other people who are doing really well, so your team can do well moving forward. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode with Christina. I know that I did. We had some laughs, we had some fun, and we learned a lot, and we'll see you on the next one.